Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Dorset Historical Society third Thursday lunchtime lecture series. This is our last lecture for 2024. Keep your eye out. We'll be presenting our first lectures for 2025. We'll be finding out what they are and advertising them within a month or so. I'm sure we'll have as great a slate next year as we've had since 2012 when we started these lectures. My name is John Mathewson. I'm the curator here. Welcome. We're here to hear Kevin O'Toole talk about the origins of the Dorset Field Club and what a murky tale he has to tell. I'm looking forward to it. Afterwards, we do have some refreshments out in the other room. Please feel free to partake, and then come back the first Saturday in December from 11 to 1. We'll be having our annual holiday open house where we'll have different sweet treats from cookbooks, area cookbooks. So area foods from the 1800s and 1900s, and also exhibits on the history of how the holidays have changed over the last 150 years. Anyway, without any further ado, here's Kevin O'Toole.
Thank you all for coming. Thank anyone who's here by Zoom. I am Kevin O'Toole, and I've been a member of the Dorset Field Club since 1972. That was with my parents, and 78 in my own right. So I've been a member for a while. And I also, my younger brother, Chris, in 1976, he had to give a talk at, or a presentation for Burton, and he had Gibb Sykes and the late Gibb Sykes and Fred Whittemore take him out on a golf course all around the course and see the old layouts that there were. And he's related that to me. I'm a longtime golfer, and I was chairman of the golf committee when we added 9 holes in 1999. The club historian originally was Jim Lynch, and after his death, they named Dudley Barrow, Dick McDonough, and I to succeed him. And with the recent deaths of Dudley and Dick, I'm it. So I was graduated from the University of Vermont with a Bachelor of History, and then I went to Notre Dame Law School. So in 2012, and a little bit before that, the club was getting a mortgage for the first time in a very long time, and they needed a certificate of title from Merchants Bank. And this certificate of title was involved because at that time there were 10 different transactions that created the field club. And we've added 2 since there, but so I have an abstract of title and to do this. So anyway, I think it's important first to start. Let me see. I guess I go this button. Nothing's happening, John. You go this one, right?
Yeah. Hold on. Why isn't that working?
There you go.
There you go.
Okay, I want to start with what the Dorset Field Club claims. Okay, you have to say this a certain. Hi, Michael. Claims. We claim to be, as it says on the historical marker, the oldest continuously operated golf course in the United States, and they should have said on the same site. Okay, there's a place called Foxburg that was organized with bylaws and everything in 1887. The St. Andrews Club was actually older than that, but they started off in Yonkers and moved. So they're not still on the same site. So anyway, there have been a number of presentations over the years about this, but in April of 2022, a man named Mike Serba, who is an independent researcher just doing it on his own for golfclubatlas.com, he wanted to submit an article on, he wanted to do a deep dive and see if this claim could be backed up. And today we're going to look at Mike Serba's investigation. I tried to get Mike Serba, but he couldn't come. And also take a little bit of a look into what we are not and how we came to be, how we did get all this land over time. Okay, so I think it's first to start with what we are not. We are not the Dorset Field Club, which prior to 1896 was not organized with bylaws or anything like that. But that's the year 1896 for that. Yes.
Can you increase your volume a little bit?
Oh, I'm sorry.
For those of us in the cheap seats.
Okay, so the Dorset Field Clubs had bylaws for the first time as of July 13, 1896. Okay, and that's when they changed their name to the Dorset Field Club. Prior to that, all references are to the Dorset Golf Links. That's important because if you see something saying Dorset Golf Links, you don't know how old it is, but it's before 1896. You know that. Okay. Now this is the Constitution and bylaws. It was said in several articles that they had been lost or destroyed. Well, not really, because Jim Fassel, so a realtor who I knew, who was a member of the field club, he was the realtor when Mrs. West's property was being sold eventually to Ralph Bailey. It's the house on the West Road with all the spruces in a row. He found this Constitution and bylaws. It's a 1900 edition, and it refers back to the original 1896 one. I just want to note something. It says the object of this association under Article 2, you can't really read that, is to provide rational amusement. I don't know what that means. An opportunity for summer sports for its members and guests, and to make Dorset an attractive place for summer visitors. Now, you might wonder, well, why did they pick 1896 and why did they do this? It's because they decided to build Woodruff Hall. And Woodruff Hall, one of the founding members was going to be, or one of the first members was a man named Henry Woodruff. And he was a wonderful man, and he died of consumption at the age of 34. I forgot to look up consumption. There's a doctor in the house. Isn't it tuberculosis? Okay. So he died of that, and they were very fond of him. And his wife decided to send along a flag that they could fly. And Arvin Harrington, who was the first president of the club, he wrote back a thank you letter. And this is the thank you letter, which I thought you could read, but you really can't. It says, we will, of course, accept the flag and prize it, not only as loyal Americans, but to its association with whom all of us loved and whose memory we all cherish and hold dear. The thought of that, I can't read the handwriting myself, but he says we're honored, and basically his selfless behavior, it will be a constant reminder to everybody who sees it. I don't think we have the flag anymore, but now the plaque saying Woodruff Hall is in the main room of the field club. Okay, so I talked about this with Dick McDonough. Why did they pick 1896? I personally think they're saying, geez, guys, we're building a building. Shouldn't we have bylaws and stuff? Get official. It still wasn't on field club land. It was built on Arvin Harrington's lot, but they were building this building. And I think that's as good a theory as anybody, but that's why it's 1896. Okay, next. I'm going to segue a little bit. This isn't quite working out quite as well as Zoom as I thought. This is an 1853 survey map of the property that's been revised through 1960. And it tells you about all the land that we owned at that time. It's too bad I don't have a laser or something like that. But I want to point out particularly that we've owned it in about 10 transactions. The first transactions were in 1918, and that was just around the field club Woodruff Hall, right around there. That was owned by Arvin Harrington. A guy named Frank Holly owned a little bit right toward the driveway of the field club and things like that. The other transactions, we didn't own any other land until 1926. Okay, and that's when out there. And you have to remember when they were golfing, wasn't even close to the clubhouse. The original clubhouse was Arvin Harrington's house. So if y'all know where Dick Hiddle lived, or Suzanne does still, that's the house. And when it got a little too big, they moved into a building across the street, which is next to Pelter's. Had the 3-pair gallery for a while, but it was only 1 story then, and it had the telephone company after that. That was next, and then they built Woodruff Hall. So that's how that happened. But the club incorporated in 1918, and that's important because I think some of these guys were getting on. Arvin Harrington, who died in 1922, he wanted to give land to the field club, but there was nothing to give it to. So they incorporated the field club in 1918. And so they had these first few transactions. And then the next few transactions, you know, the big parcels were not until 1926. But I wanted just to, for fun, show you, there's a, on this, you see this here, and there's a little jog out. Okay, right there, that's Tammy Passero's house. Okay, Timmy Passero's house. But let's just say in 1953, there was a transaction with a Millard estate, and they bought, including Tammy Passero's house, all the way here, here, and all the way this big jog that goes around the 16th hole now, the green. Okay, so it includes, we've changed our numbers over time. It includes the 9th hole, the 1st hole, all of the 1st hole would have been the 1st and 2nd, this part of the 7th and part of the 11th and part of the 16th. It's a massive purchase. So I did the title search, and this is what it looks like when you plot it out. Okay, this huge thing. So you see this whole thing. So imagine the green is right here at the 16th, which we had to buy from Madame Svetlova. But I thought you might find it fun.
Where is Route 30?
Route 30 is right here.
Okay, I just wanted to.
Now, the thing about this is that I thought you might find interesting, I was talking about Joel Newsy the other day, is the Millard included this. And on the other map, there's a jog. Doesn't include that. Okay, so at any rate, we bought this, and according to Phoebe Ann Lewis's history of the field club that she wrote in 1986, and it was never published, but I have a copy. There was great rejoicing because this land had just been leased before that. We owned this, and then 4 days later, we deed the land to Dr. Pierce, the Passero place. Dick McDonough and I talked about that too. We think it was an inside deal. We think that Dr. Pierce really financed the Millard purchase, but he said, this is fine, but you're deeding back the house to me. And they did 4 days later. So we did own that land, but only for 4 days. Okay. This, some of you might recognize, this is a placemat that was at the field club. If you grew up, you saw this when we joined in 72. This was the placemat, and it had the old numbers of 1 and 2 is now the 11th, you know, and 3 is now the 6th hole. But this is how the field club essentially was. Okay. And the way that I grew up doing it. Okay. Next, I have a blank screen here. Oh, this is the Svetlova piece on that part when I had it hooked around. When we bought this, when we did the new 18 holes, we found out we had an Act 250 permit to go over the stream and everything, and we found out that we didn't own that land. In fact, we didn't own the 16th green. We didn't own it. Madame Svetlova did, and I was put in charge of negotiating with her. And I came there, and she had already seen her lawyer, and she goes, "It's 20,000, and you're getting the subdivision permits." And I said, "Fine." That was my negotiating skill. So, Madame Svetlova used to have little kids with tutus. She had a dance studio. Okay, this is the Pinio property, which was, I also had a hand in. The Pinio property had been owned forever, and this is the other part of this is the driving range. And in doing a little bit of survey work, we found out that a good portion of the driving range was not owned by us. And not only that, she had an easement right through the driving range, this land, to nothing. So we negotiated and we bought that. We bought it for like 50,000, and we took back a mortgage of 40 from them. So, but we paid it off. So anyway, that's done. So this I thought you might find helpful. This was the 1953 boundary. Then in 59, we added this from Zana Edgerton. The Swanson property. This is essentially where the second hole now is. That was added in 84. We've added this Svetlova piece plus another little thing from Norman Maxwell. This is the brand new property, okay? And there's the Pinio property, and there's been a couple other little things, the boundary line adjustment with the church. But it's not just one property, it's been quite a few. But we didn't own any part of this land at all until 1926. Okay. So prior to 1974, specifically in 1965, there was a man named John English for the U.S. Golf Journal. He came and he interviewed Bill Barrows Sr., who was only born in 1886, but he knew a lot of the founding members. And anyway, he said that he took Mr. English all around. He showed them photographs that clearly showed play before 1896. And he said, we know when our club was founded. It was 1886. And Mr. English concluded that given his character, given that he showed him all sorts of different layouts, it was probably so. But it was just anecdotal. In July 12th of 1974, Gibby Sykes, gave a talk at the Historical Society. It was in the church. He actually gave the talk. And he had something else. He came armed with a map that I've distributed to you. And in 1974, he says in his transcript of the talk that we do have, that he handed out copies then. So this is the map upon which most of our history is based. Now, this is really interesting for a couple of reasons. And Mike Serba really thought this was interesting too. It's remarkably specific in its legislative, but I don't know what was going on with him, but you turn it one way, the land's this way. Then you turn it another way, he's written it that way. You know, he doesn't say it was north, south, east, west, nothing. But let me go on. You know, there we go. The magical map. Okay.
Highway Route 30.
Just a sec. Yes, highway is Route 30. So just to kind of orient you, this is the Stearns property. Used to be the Evans property. Okay. And so the AT right now is right about there. But it does talk about the hill, has the hill is still there, you know, and you'll notice that a lot of it was swamped this way, so that most of the course was elsewhere, away from the clubhouse, way over here. So also on the 6th hole, there's these sort of I don't know, women called it the whale, but you know, right where they now have the 5th green, they've resurrected the new 5th green. That's right here, and you can recognize it where it juts out. Okay. So there's a lot of very specific things. And over here, it does talk about the house, and it talks about a little bullpen, has fences, the Edgerton pasture, a clover field, a fence, this is the Waldo Sykes farm. But what it really does say, it says, course laid out by A.W. Harrington, Esquire, and Mayor of the city, assisted by a crowd of thugs, touts, and loafers. First Assistant Chief Engineer, Doc Hawley, D.D., Bill Kent, A.M., M.D., DQL. The course was planned and laid out on Sunday, September 12, 1886. The aforementioned A.W. Harrington, Chief Engineer and Mayor of the city, was late to dinner on this account and caught hell when he got home, all of which I can swear to, Gillette. Now, if you turn the map a little, this is curious. This doesn't claim to be the original. It says a copy of the original map by A.W. Harrington of the Dorset Golf Links, Monday, September 13, 1886, Dorset, Vermont. So we don't have the original, we just have these copies. And the original copy, if you can say that, when we had the centennial in 1986, apparently President Larry Thompson sent a lot of these things to, you know, to be copied, and they were all lost by the company. Larry was furious because, among other things, Gibb Sykes said in his transcript, there were 5 different layouts, and he had overlays of all the different layouts. And that's what I don't have anymore. Mike Serpa thought that there weren't really totally different layouts. They just sort of reconfigured it a little. But I disagree with Mike there, because as the club started to have no swamp, that started to get the swamp drained, it moved closer and closer to the clubhouse, the field club. And there were some things that really did change. So when I played golf with Fred Whittemore, you know, he bragged with Sarge Fenn that he used to drive the 7th green, which is now no longer the first green, but the old first green. And then Whittemore said, and then Ben said, did he tell you the green used to be in front of the creek? You know, and then they told me that there was the now present ladies' 9th tee, that was actually a green in one of the iterations in the 40s, where you teed it up over the hill because the trees weren't there. So there's been a lot of little things. And in his talk, Gibbs Sykes talks about getting a hole in one, and the green was between where the 9th fairway, the 18th fairway is now, and the 10th fairway. And I haven't been able to figure out exactly. And the hole started where our maintenance sheds are. So I'm not really sure. I think there've been quite a few layouts, and I haven't been able to figure them all out. Okay. So anyway, it's based on this, but there are a lot of very, very specific things in here. He also named the holes. You know, it was Frost, Knoll, Edgerton, Lot, Highway, Clover Patch, Elm Tree, Stump Hollow, and Return. So let's just talk about where this went. Okay, it's original thing. We start. I'm going to have to look at this because I can't deal with that one. Okay, we start across Route 30. Okay, across Route 30. Okay, so where is that? Give or take. This is the Stearns house. This is about where the 8th green is. So let's just talk about across the street from where the 8th green, from the, not the 9th green, but the 8th green, about there. Comes down to Stump Hollow, down over the hill, down to the bottom where the old little par 3 used to be. Okay, so we go there. Then, just a second here. Then from there, we tee off and go to the 2nd hole, which is give or take about where the 11th tee is now. Okay, and then we went from across the hill to here. Then we're going to the 2nd hole here, about where the 11th tee is. Then we have the next hole, the 3rd hole. So we're going back here to where now you know where the Stearns house is, there's a ravine and it goes down. So you're in the lower section, you're over here. And then the 4th green goes back. Okay. And it's very hard to read that. I apologize to people on Zoom. So the fourth green, and then the 5th green, you go heading back. Hang on. You have to walk all over to the 5th green, which is about where the 11th tee is now. And then you hit to this area here where the present green is for the 5th green. So the 5th green was the 5th green. Then they have a 6th green, and you tee off to about where the 6th tee is, and then 6th green is now. And then you came back for the 7th green, was also the same green. Okay. All right. Anyway, that was the layout. So here are out of the Beck pictorial book. These are the thugs, touts, and loafers. Now, this at the bottom of this picture says Dorset Golf Links. So we can't time, we know it's before 1896. So I want you to particularly pay attention to this young man in the plaid shirt. Okay, he's younger than everybody else. This is Joe Harrington. He's the brother of the founder. This is Arvin Harrington. And this is Ramsden Gillette. Okay. So here's the picture that we also have up on our field club. We have it everywhere. And it shows the back of Ramsden Gillette teeing off on the 6th tee. And I think they were taken the same day. Can't prove it, but they're wearing the same shirt, wearing the same pants. You know, and Joe, his countenance is pretty valuable. So you can see people teeing and playing on that green. And this is probably the most valuable photograph we have because, you know, clearly they were playing in the 1890s, at least before 1896. That's what we know for sure. And they were playing golf there, and they still are now doing that now because we've resurrected it as the new fifth green. This is a picture outside of the Harrington House. And I want to direct your attention to this young man because we have several different photos of him. That is his mother, and that is Ramsin Gillette right there. So we have evidence from letters and things like that Ramsin Gillette, his father died when he was young. His mother died also too, but they used to vacation with the Hollies and on several of these families, the Harringtons. And this is outside the Harrington home. So Ramsin Gillette, as a boy, did in fact summer here. This is important to note because in a lot of these histories, they call Ramsin Gillette the one of the founders. And you can't really say that because in 1886, he was 9 years old. Okay. However, that doesn't really, Serba said, that doesn't really disqualify him from being the guy who made this copy of this map because he summered here, he grew up, he became an attorney. He was the executor of Harriet Harrington's estate when she died in 1940. He was a World War I veteran and decorated. And it's certainly reasonable to think that going through all of her papers, he found this map and made a copy of it. You know, it's not dated, the copy. And prior to Gibbs Sykes' talk, no one ever mentions this map. None of these original members ever mentioned the map. And at the time of the making of the map, Arvin Harrington, he died in 1922 at the age of 63, a little older than that, but he was 27. George Prentice and George Harrison, they were from New York. They were 21 and 22. Bill Kent and Doc Holly was 28. They were all just young guys. And they called themselves thugs, touts, and loafers. None of them were a doctor. None of them were an esquire. None of them were any of that. They were just having fun. But I just used this photo as a crowd who clearly they enjoyed themselves. So anyway, Mike Serba gave me this long article. And he said he's 9 years old. We have this map. It's remarkably specific. But, you know, I can't really prove much. And, you know, Dick was gone, Dudley was gone, and I thought we were screwed, you know. So I wrote back to him and said, well, isn't it reasonable to assume that although there's no mention in any of the newspapers, because this is what Mike had access to, he could look up all the newspapers at the time. Nobody ever mentions anything about being the oldest club until the 1946, when a former president, Edward Brumley, he starts mentioning that we're the oldest. But we had nothing to go on. And then in 1974, this magical map appears. Okay. And so I said, well, what if it wasn't really Ramsin Gillette? You know, it just says Gillette. So he goes on and he starts comparing all the things because he was an attorney. His name was on a lot of things. And they all seem to coincide with that of the map. I mean, here's for a military thing, and this is almost identical to his name. So we've pretty well nailed down that this was Ramsin Gillette who made this map. We can't tell exactly when, but I think that when he was cleaning up the estate, that's a reasonable assumption. The second thing I said to him is, well, they were charging fees to use the Woodruff Hall and everything like that, but you don't charge fees to use land you don't own. In fact, you don't necessarily publicize that you're golfing on Waldo Sykes's farm and Emma Edgerton's farm on Doc Holly's farm when you don't own them? And so I said, they maybe just were a little, cautious about that. And he thought that too. So then he went back and did a deeper dive. And anyway, in this map that you have in front of you, if you look at just a second. Okay. If you look, I have to go back to the map now. If you go to the third hole, here's where the Stearns house is, okay? And then you have the fourth tee going back, the hole goes right this way. And it would have gone right through this really old barn that Miss Donatbeck made. So whoever made this map had to be familiar with what the course was then, okay? So let me go back to this. This barn is not new. It was made by Cecilia Donatbeck, and we have an article in the Manchester Journal about that I thought I had loaded up, but I did not. And essentially, Serba reached out to me and said, "Do you know anything about this barn?" And I said, "Well, yes, I wrote an article about the Pinnacle. She bought it in 1985, somebody from Roberts, and it was called the Ed Frost Place. Remember, the first hole was called Frost Knoll." Okay. And then he said he also reached out to someone at the Dorset Historical Society, sounded a lot like John, and said, "When was the Frost House built?" And the person at the Dorset Historical Society said, "Good question. The 1956 Tuttle Atlas does not have the house there, but it is there in 1969. So presumably John said somewhere between 1856 and 1869. So the house did exist, but the barn did not. And it also says in this article that shortly thereafter, the Dorset Field Club rerouted, did the first rerouting of its course. Why? Couldn't go through a barn, And Cecilia Donatbeck, was a lady who got her way generally. So as a little aside, Cecilia Donatbeck, the town fathers, she could print money. She was a granddaughter of great John Jacob Astor. But they came to her and they wanted electricity in Dorset. They wanted to bring electricity from Manchester. And it was going to cost $5,000 to do it. And she said, "Okay, but I really don't want to see telephone lines in the village from Route 30 to at least the church." And that's why it's underground. That was 1922.
Wow.
Sometimes you don't notice what you don't see. Okay. So, oh, wait, I went too far. Okay. So in the end, Mike, who had originally thought this is a nice story, but he couldn't disprove this. And he said, what we do know now is we definitely know why it's called Frost Knoll, the first hole. We definitely know there's additional evidence that there was a golf course on the property prior to 1896, because it mentions it in the article. We also have the photos that we have of Ramsden Gillette on the course. Clearly Dorset Golf Links, so it's clearly before, maybe not 1886, but clearly before 1896. We also know that Miss Donatbeck and her cattle barn had to change it. So whoever made this map had to know about the course before then. Okay. Because it seemingly was built on the original third green and fourth tee. So Serba ends up by saying, "You make the call." And since he's published his article, some people have said, you can't really say it was an organized golf course if you're playing on somebody else's land without leases and just by permission. It was, however, we do have evidence that it was played rather continuously through those summers by people who vacationed here. So I can't definitively say it, but I think that we can hold our heads high if you say we're the oldest golf course being continuously played on the same site. And if you say it like that, and I did, there were some hats that were put saying organized 1886, and I said, sell those and don't make any more. I'd like to just conclude by saying what I said to Mike. The map's reference to thugs, touts, and loafers, I'll go back to that. The map's reference to thugs, touts, and loafers seems a good-hearted jest in reference to good friends who did not take each other that seriously. That is why I play mostly. I miss being able to score the way I did once, but I mostly cherish the camaraderie and, opportunity to play around with on a weekly basis in the summer months and into the fall with my own regular band of thugs, touts, and loafers. I imagine you feel, and that most recreational golfers feel, the same. So I hope that, I don't know if people have questions or, so it's important to know that that was a copy of a map. It's Ramsden Gillette. The historical marker still calls him one of the founders on the historical marker, but we can't take that down. And when we have the Ramsden Gillette Invitational, it's really good to, to honor him. Yes.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, guys. Have a good lunch. You're one of my thugs, touts, and loafers, Rocco.
We were just discussing with the Italians in those names. That's okay.
Right.
Actually, your combo.
Art, you had a question.
Yeah, Kevin, do you have any proof whether this was all done at one time by one person or whether,
Well, we do know that Gillette, that's his handwriting throughout. So Gillette was the guy who made the copy of the map. We don't have the original map anymore. We don't have that, but we do know it was his handwriting and he made it. And it was Service's theory and mine too, that when he was the executor of the estate, he came across this. Now, why it was never mentioned from, Ramsden Gillette died in 1941 at the age of 63. Okay. Why it wasn't mentioned from then all the way to 1974 with Gibbs Sykes, I don't know about that.
well, there are a lot of thugs, touts, and loafers involved.
Right. And it was a 9-hole course. And if you look at the pictures, it wasn't a manicured fairway back then. It was managed by goats, and cows, and there were fences. And there were, once in a while, there's references in these old historical articles of, they really liked the idea that the fence came down, and these people were all related. Arvin Harrington, he came to the area from Troy, New York. Most of them were from Troy. When he married Harriet Sheldon from Rupert. Okay. And her cousin was Frank Holly. And they were related to the Sykes. And it was all incestuous. Any questions? Mike?
You know when they hired the first superintendent?
Grant Matson, that was about 1930, 32. I have that exact rate. And he's the one who really drained most of the swamps, Grant Matson. And he, it was before that because he retired in 1937. So they said he was there for about 30 years. So he's the guy who really drained all those swamps. And by doing that, the course could move closer to the clubhouse.
Really like 1910 or whatever.
10s to the 30s.
So where did the drainage go after he drained the swamp? Because it still has water, rain.
I don't really know. I mean, stories like that get lost. So for example, if you ever play the 11th hole, there's all these mounds. Okay. In 2000, 1999, 2000, the Dorset Playhouse was totally renovated and they created a basement and there was this massive mountain of dirt. And the late Paul Robinson came over there and said, "What are you doing with all that dirt?" And they said, "Oh." So he took all that dirt and put it all on the 11th hole. And that's why that's not as wet as it used to be. So I know the answer to that, but what Grant Matson did with all of it, I don't know.
That creates some and you're lucky to have that because if that had been developed, all those impervious surfaces could have created flooding. So you have a natural floodway with the golf course.
Right, and there is a flood on off the 5th hole when we made that, we had to fill in an acre of wetland. We had to create a new one. I remember that.
So it really serves a great purpose, not just as a golf course.
And when we added the 42 acres on the West Road, about 85% of the club voted to buy it, because everybody knew it was gonna be houses otherwise. But only 57% voted to create a more golfing. So,
Is there room for expansion?
not now. We had the land, the lower holes we had owned since 59. And we now use them. I suppose if Michael Flett sold, you could go a little farther that way. Not a lot of other places. Yes, Andy.
Pro and tennis was added to the field club. Those are old.
Tennis actually is mentioned in the first constitution and stuff, so it predates the official golf. I think golf and tennis, they said, oh, we got tennis. Oh, great. And they didn't mention golf because they didn't own it. And the first ticket was $15 a year. Yes, Michael.
You
Mr. Potter.
mentioned John English earlier.
Mhm.
Now, what was his?
He was a reporter for the USGA,
Okay.
and he wrote an article on the competing clubs that said that they were the oldest at the time, Dorset, Foxburg, and St. Andrews. And he concluded that Dorset was one of the two, either that or Foxburg.
You know about what years that was?
It was 1965, he wrote the article.
So do you know where he was from? Was he from Williamstown?
I don't know that. He took a tour of property with William Barrows Senior, who died in 72. So I didn't know him.
Because there was a John English that was, worked at Williams for years, was the alumni director down there, and had a lot to do with Taconic.
And Taconic, the same designer who designed Taconic, designed Rutland. I know
Right.
that.
Right.
I don't know, but he was a big writer. I have a copy of the article I can give you,
I'm
but
wondering, because I knew him and my parents knew him really well. And I think he did have some association with the USGA, but I'm not positive.
so he wrote this article just to he could have been just like Mike Serba, who just
Yeah.
on his own makes this article and submits it.
Yeah.
But
Hope to check with my cousins because they were there.
so I'm hoping that this has been entertaining, or at least I hope I haven't been a little discombobulated. I'm not the best with Zoom. I hope you agree with my theory that this guy didn't have many outfits and this was the same day.
Can you identify all the people in that photograph?
They do in the Beck history. I know that this is Joe Harrington. I know that's Arvin Harrington. I know that's Ramson Gillette. Well, apparently no one noticed it, like the guy's a lot younger. I think when his father died and his mother took him up, and I think they adopted him as sort of the uncle, and he knew all of them. He was the pallbearer at Arvin Harrington's funeral. He was the attorney for the executor of the estate of Harriet Harrington. He knew them all clearly, but I think they just, they piled around. So, and I think that thugs, touts, and loafers, they were just, no one was a dentist, no one was a doctor. They were just like having fun. Yes,
They weren't doctors, they weren't lawyers, but they were railway executives and salesmen from Troy, which was a major port city, so
right.
they weren't starving either.
No, and you can talk all you want when you golf, but this happens all the time. People come to the first tee and they start telling me how they golf. We're all gonna find out. It's a meritocracy. So in the area, remember, we have, Equinox was formed in 1896. Walter Travis, that was his course, and then Walter Travis designed Aquanic, and we have a lot of very good holes.
So he do Troy too?
I did something for the Dorset players on Walter Travis. You can see that on GNAT, I think. It was a little over 60 courses that he designed. So, unless there's any question, yes?
Did you say a word about the property that the club acquires to expand to 18 holes?
Yes, it was owned by Nims, Pomerantz, and Scott. And before Pomerantz, it was owned by B. Humphreys. I don't know if many of you remember B. She was one of these people that when you're driving in the car, you swear no one's driving. She's too short. There's no one at the wheel. Anyway, she said the three people, Dr. Nims said that he would sell the 42 acres to the field club when Jim O'Neill no longer wanted to farm it. Jim stopped farming. He said, sign me up. Scott always wanted to sell. And then B. Humphrey said she'd sign it to the field club over her dead body. So anyway, what happened? That's actually what happened. She was intercups of something. And you know where the pottery shop is now? There used to be a U, and a cop car would always have a speed trap right there. She goes off the road and broadsides the cop car with a Lincoln. Okay? You and I, we're in jail. I don't know, but not her, not B. Humphreys. And B. Humphreys, her house used to be at the end of Church Street and West Road. Who's the family there? Not Gilbert, the other side. No, the other side. Harding, right. So that's where she lived. And she was one of the first members, she and her husband, of the Dorset, of the Southern Vermont Art Center. So anyway, she broadsides, and within a month, she's not suspended, nothing. She's got another car. And she's going down from an art center thing. And this time at the bottom of the art center street, there's a parked UPS truck. And she comes down and she rams him, and she's killed. And her daughter said, sign me up. And it was $600,000 to buy it, but everybody knew it was going to be houses otherwise. So we said, fine. And we made it contingent on getting all the permits and everything to build a course, and we did. And the closing took place in 1997. And I was part of that. And then the course was built. It's opened July 17, 1999. And the first person to tee off was Elise Wormser, who had been, the oldest living golf champion at the time. So it's a proud moment. But I do remember the negotiations for that additional holes. It was something. Everybody, and I took about 50 or so people up there. It used to be an alfalfa field. And where the 14th hole is now, that was a dump. It was like, Ed Blackwell told me, that was just like, there was bicycles, there was a dead dog, there was refrigerators, like everything. And in the side where there's a big indentation, there was half of a truck in there. And they took the half truck out, and Steve Durkee liked it and kept that, that swale, Jim. He just kept it. And the stone wall that ends actually used to go all the way in front. And there were trees that surrounded that. And and also they raised it 10 feet. It used to be much lower. So anyway, I hope that's helpful. Anything else?
Thank you.
Otherwise?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. And let me end this meeting.